garden friends, my name is Alexa and welcome back to Bloom and Wilt Gardens. In today's video, we are continuing on the series to go over the 12-month home garden plan. Today we're covering the month of June and the 5 P's of garden planning. Planning, planting, pruning, picking, and preserving. By following the steps I provide in these videos with the 5 P's, you can know exactly what to do each month of the year for your home vegetable garden for those of you like me who are living in a northern United States. I'm growing in Zone 6B in Northeast Ohio. However, this information is good for anyone who is in the Great Lakes region, which includes states like New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. So if you're ready to dive into the month of June, come hang out with me for a bit and let's talk all about the things we need to do in the home garden. All of the information that I'm sharing today is included in my 12-month home garden guide, the Great Lakes Veggie Gardener Guide. It is available as an ebook on my website, www.bloomandwiltgardens.com. By following my guide and all the videos in this series, you can know exactly what vegetables you can plant throughout the entire year. In some places, you may be able to get away with all 12 months. Where I live in Ohio, we get about 10 months where we can grow a large amount of our vegetables. But many don't know that or realize that with some special measures of season extension and growing the right crop for the time of year, but I break all of that down in my guide and these videos. So make sure to share with a gardening friend so that way you too can grow vegetables longer throughout the year in your very own backyards. So let's dive right into the month of June. First up, we're gonna talk about planning your home garden in June. What are all of the tasks that you need to be on top of in the month of June? And the reason that we need to understand these things is because it can be very easy to get overwhelmed as a home gardener, especially if you're trying to grow a large garden. You may get very busy with lots of summer activities and your garden will start to get weedy or wilting plants. Pests are gonna come and take over. All of these things are bound to happen, but I share a lot of tips on how to prevent these things and make sure that you get the harvest that you're looking for. So first off, in June, be prepared for less rainfall. In my experience, June typically has been more of a dry month. And with that, you need to be prepared to water your garden more often. Now, in the last video when we talked about the things to do in May, I discussed preparing for June by putting down your irrigation or soaker hoses or sprinkler systems, anything that you can do to make your watering easier for you, because once June and then July and August come, it gets hot and you're gonna have to water your plants more often. Any seedlings that you're putting in the ground will need to be watered every 1 to 2 days. That's because seedlings have very shallow root systems. Now, as those seedlings grow and mature into larger plants, their root systems will get longer and go deeper into the ground as they search for water and the minerals that they need to grow big and strong. But until that happens, you have to be on top of watering more often, especially if it's not raining a lot. Now, if you are getting rainfall, then you're off the hook. I don't recommend watering your garden by hose if it had already rained that day or the day before, especially if it was a good soaking. Giving your garden and your plants about 3 to 5 days even in between waterings, if it's like you get a big heavy downpour, is going to be fine. Unless you notice things are wilting, then go ahead and step in and water more. But it's always better to err on the side of less water than more water. Now, if you haven't already put any kind of mulching around your plants, make sure to get that done now. I will tell you that with this time of year, when we have more drought than any other time of year, and those weeds are gonna creep up on you fast, especially by like August when the garden just goes crazy, you need to get ahead of that by mulching around your plants now. And mulching can be things like grass clippings, shredded leaves. You can even use hay or straw. Be cautious with fresh wood chips. Those tend to suck nitrogen out of the soil, which will leave your plants stunted, meaning they won't grow very big. So I don't like to use fresh wood chips in my garden beds, and use those more for the pathways in between my garden beds. But if you have wood chips that are older, maybe 2 or 3 years old, then those can be a better choice for putting in the actual garden beds. But whatever you decide to use, mulch your garden. Do not wait, do not skip it. It will save you so much hassle in the long run. As you're planting seeds and transplanting seedlings, make sure you're keeping track of your planting dates in your garden journal. If you don't have a garden journal, my 12-month guide does include journaling pages that will help you remember what you did that month and be able to look back on things. So we have spaces for your accomplishments, what you did well, what's still in progress, your biggest lessons, the hardest thing you learned this month, what did you observe. So there's spaces in the guide to record all of these things, as well as a month-by-month calendar. And then you can go back next year, so when you're planning your garden a year from now, you can go and look at all of your notes that you kept, which is really gonna help you grow as a gardener, because you start to learn what worked and what didn't work in your garden, in your yard, in your specific microclimate, which is gonna be different from place to place. I could go 5 miles down the road and it's very different growing conditions even there. Where I live, I'm up on a ridge and I have more of a sandy soil. If I go just 5 miles south, it is all clay, and it's colder there, surprisingly, because since I'm closer to Lake Erie, I get a different microclimate where I live compared to 5 miles south, where it can be colder. So it's just little things like that you start to learn as the years go by and you get more experienced in gardening. You may start to notice an increase of pest pressure in June. So this is a good time to have some preventative measures, like putting a mesh around your plants, like a tulle, like the same fabric that they use to make tutus. It's really good and an inexpensive way to cover plants to help keep different bugs and critters off from eating them if you're looking to go an organic route. There is other pest control things like diatomaceous earth, which is good to sprinkle around plants, especially if you're having slugs eating things or any soft-bodied insect. The diatomaceous earth basically dries out that insect and it will kill them, but it's an organic way of doing that. And there's also things like neem oil and BT, several different more organic natural options. I personally don't use any sort of pesticides that are non-organic in my garden. That's a personal choice, because we want to have the food that we're growing to be the cleanest, purest form that we can possibly get. As your young plants are growing, make sure that you're weeding around them so that way they're not competing with any other plants, unwanted plants. They will compete for nutrition. So you want your veggie plant to get all of the good stuff that's in your well-composted soil, and that weed that you don't want, whatever plant that may be, pull that out and just try and keep on top of that as much as you can. By June, all threat of frost should be past, meaning we shouldn't have any more 32-degree or below nights from now until sometime in October. Your first frost date of the year will be different depending on where you live, but for most of us in the northern states, we will likely see our first frost date of the year sometime in early to mid-October. I want to throw a plug in for the fall garden. If you want to have more vegetables to harvest in the fall, so those are going to be the months of September, October, November, and December, then start thinking about what those plants you want to grow are. I do talk about what plants can grow in the colder months in my earlier videos when we're talking about the spring garden, but a lot of those are the same plants that you can grow in the fall and early winter. we have to plant our fall gardens in midsummer. So that's usually like mid-July is when we're getting our fall garden planted. So we're still a few weeks away from that, but if you want to do that, you need to start thinking about it now so you're prepared, because it does sneak up on you with all the summer things going on. Kids are out of school, people are taking vacations, you're outside more. The fall garden planting really does sneak up on you. So start thinking about that now. So what are all the wonderful things that we can plant in the month of June? Lots of plants can just be direct sown into the ground, meaning you don't have to start your seeds in the house anymore. You can just put the seeds directly in the ground. If you're in Ohio, you can still likely get away with putting tomato seeds in the ground in June, especially the earlier part of June, and you will see a harvest before the first frost date, especially if it's a faster growing tomato variety. But I will say we're probably getting really close to the cutoff of that season. But there's still lots of other things that you can direct sow now and also in July and August and September and still get a harvest. So things like bush beans, pole beans, edamame, corn. You should be succession sowing things like lettuce and other greens. Typically lettuce and spinach and kale and all those sorts of greens do better in the colder months, but if you have a shadier part of your garden, or you can put these things underneath larger plants, so let's say maybe underneath where your tomato plantings are, or some other larger plant, and they have more shade, then your greens, you could get more greens to grow throughout the season. And so every week or every 2 weeks, you can sprinkle a couple more seeds in different locations, so that way you're having your lettuces come up at different times, and then you kind of have more of a continuous harvest rather than everything coming up at once. So you can direct sow carrot, beets, cucumbers, melons, summer squash, winter squashes, okra. If you have sweet potato slips, make sure to get those in as soon as possible. Sweet potatoes take like 120 days to fully mature. I usually harvest sweet potatoes towards the end of October, so usually there will be a frost or two, which is fine because the sweet potato itself is underground, so it's not really being affected by the frost, but the greenery on top will start to die back. But as long as you get those plants in like as soon as possible in the month of June, then you should still be able to get a harvest of those. And red or white potatoes, we still have quite a long time to grow potatoes. You can plant your potatoes probably even like towards the end of July and still get a harvest for the fall. Lots of herbs can be planted now. Your basil, thyme, oregano, sage, rosemary, chamomile, dill, and fennel. I have chamomile and fennel that overwintered because they're perennial varieties, and all of those are ready for harvesting right now. I have tons and tons of chamomile flowers. I can't keep up with it. I have so much. And my fennel that came back up on its own is huge. I mean, it's taller than me. So those things, once you get them established, they will keep growing. And lots of flower seeds can still be sown now through the end of the month, even in July. Those are like zinnias and marigolds, wonderful flowers for fall gardens. Sunflowers, cosmos. Cosmos do like colder weather, so when I sow my cosmos seeds a little bit later in the summer, I get a really wonderful crop into the fall, and it seems like the blossoms always excel once we get a couple frosts. Borage and nasturtium and calendula are also wonderful additions for the garden. Longer season plants like peppers and eggplants, those take a long time to mature, and likely if you haven't started those plants from seed or have put transplants into the ground by this point in time, it's probably unlikely that if you were to start from the beginning right now in June that you would get a harvest in time before that first frost comes. I wish it wasn't the case, but typically you wouldn't really have enough time for that plant to grow to maturity before that first frost day comes, unless you have some kind of greenhouse or low tunnel, some sort of structure to keep those plants in When the frost comes, then you can extend your season a little bit, and that's good. But if you don't have that, then you may be pushing it if you try to start those plants from seed right now. But if you have seedlings that are a decent size, then you may still be okay to go ahead and transplant them and then get a harvest before the frost comes. So now we're going to talk about pruning. What are the things that we want to be pruning back in the month of June? So there may be lots of your spring crops that are trying to go to seed because it's getting hot out. And when I talk about spring crops, I'm referring to things like our leafy greens, our brassica plants, which is anything like in the cabbage and broccoli family. They're going to be starting to put off yellow flowers. So a shoot and little clusters of yellow flowers off these plants. And if you're seeing that, that means the plant's trying to go to seed, which is its next phase in the life cycle. So vegetable plants will put out a flower, and if you don't do anything with it, the flowers will eventually fall off, they'll die back, and then what's left are all of these little pods that come out of the stalk, and they're green little pods. After several weeks, those pods will dry up and turn brown, and that's where the seeds are that you can collect to grow more of those plants in the future. But if this is all happening before you get your head of broccoli, then, or your head of cabbage, or your head of cauliflower, unfortunately that plant is moving on to the next phase of the life cycle, and you will likely not be able to get your big head of broccoli that you want, unfortunately. Sometimes you can, if you catch it early, you can pinch those flowers off, but I have in my experience found that once a plant goes to seed or is trying to go to seed, you can't really stop it. It's already, in its plant brain, it has already moved on. But if you have like leafy greens that are trying to go to seed, especially spinach is one of the first ones in June that go to seed. Spinach likes it cold. Then you can pinch those, you can pinch that back and try to cut it down, you know, maybe leaving like this much left on the plant, and that might stop or slow the process of it trying to go to seed. So pinching off any kind of flower heads that you're finding on plants that are trying to move on is one way to prune those back, kind of extend their life a little bit longer before they go into the seed making stage. And then it's important to keep up on pruning any leaves on any of your veggie plants that kind of look diseased or yellowed. By cutting those off as soon as you find them, you're going to slow or reduce the spread of disease kind of going through your garden. I don't see a ton of that in June. As the season goes on, you'll likely notice more plants starting to struggle, especially as there's fluctuation in, you know, temperatures, it getting really hot, or if you're in a place where it's getting a lot of rain, that's typically when things start to spread. But June is a wonderful time to start picking and harvesting lots of your veggies, especially if you started early with a spring garden. So all of your leafy greens should definitely be ready. I am usually overflowing in lettuce by June, especially because lettuce is trying to go to seed, so I'm cutting it back a lot, and I just have lettuce for days. So lettuce, expect to have a great lettuce harvest in June. Your spinach is definitely going to be ready. It would probably be ready a month ago, but especially if it's been growing in a shadier location, your spinach is going to be ready. Kale and Swiss chard. I love June for strawberries. We just had our big strawberry harvest. It was about 2 to 3 weeks of continuous strawberries. My strawberry patch is still a little bit young, so we got a really good harvest, but between the 4 of us in the family, the strawberries really never made it in the house. We would just go out and I'd gather up my kids and say, let's go pick strawberries, and then we would eat them right there in the garden. But we had a lot of strawberries. They were so good. They were big and delicious. If you had your peas and chives, radishes planted early, those are going to be ready for harvest now. Cilantro is likely going to start going to seed, so go ahead and harvest as much of that as you can. Cilantro is a cold weather crop, and I know it frustrates a lot of people that they can't grow cilantro through the summer, or they set flowers before you know, the tomatoes and peppers are ready, because everyone wants cilantro to make like salsa, right? Unfortunately, cilantro is a cold season crop. So you're going to have your best cilantro from June and earlier, or you can try and plant it for your fall garden when it gets cold again. Garlic scapes are going to appear on your hard neck garlic varieties in June. My scapes all started coming out this week, and that is a task I'm going to work on this weekend, is cutting all of my garlic scapes back. I do have a detailed video talking about garlic scapes, what they are, when to harvest them, what you can do with them. So check that out if you are new to garlic and growing garlic, or even if you want to grow garlic in the future. It's important to know what to do with the garlic scapes. By cutting them, it will help you grow a bigger bulb of garlic. So make sure to watch that before you start your garlic season. And then you may still have some asparagus coming up. After the asparagus has been in the ground for 3 years, you can start to harvest it. From when they first start to appear, I like to harvest the asparagus spears for about 3 to 4 weeks. And then after that point, I let them continue growing. I stop cutting them and they grow into these big ferns. And when they go into their fern stage, that means they are trying to bring in energy into the plant that's stored in the root system. That is what's going to feed it over winter and then be able to produce more asparagus next year. So you want to let it go into that fern stage and stop harvesting about 3 to 4 weeks after the shoots first appear. And then any wild edibles such as dandelions, purple dead nettle, and purslane are really great medicinal sort of herbs that you can use in a variety of ways, and you usually can find those all over the place for free. So lastly, we're going to talk about how to preserve some of these wonderful veggies and fruits that we were able to harvest in the month of June. With the strawberry, so if you're getting a really wonderful strawberry harvest, 2 ways that I like to preserve strawberries is by freezing them or making jam. When I preserve my strawberries, I like to wash them and then cut them up into slices, lay them out on a cookie sheet, and then put that in the freezer. And then after a few hours, when they have frozen, I take the cookie sheet out of the freezer and then put those pieces in Ziploc bags. And I do it that way instead of putting everything in a Ziploc bag to begin with, is so that when I want to use the frozen strawberries in the future, we use them a lot for like making smoothies, I can easily pull the frozen strawberries out like by a handful, rather than if I put them all in the bag at the same time when they're still damp from washing and cutting. That's all gonna clump together, and now I'm gonna have like this giant clump of frozen strawberries that I can't exactly take a huge clump and put it in my blender cup. It's just gonna not work that way. So if you pre-freeze them on a cookie sheet, it's much easier to get what you need out of your baggie in the future. And then making strawberry jam is a really wonderful way to preserve the fruit. I've made jam, I've done sugar-free jams. There is a type of sugar-free pectin that you can get, and it's made by Sure Gel. And you can get that and use some other like non-sugar sweetener like monk fruit or stevia in the place of cane sugar. And with the sugar-free pectin, it will set. And I've had good experience doing that with a jalapeno jelly that I've made. And it still tastes just as good as a, cane sugar jam would, and it has preserved fine. So since our family does try to be sugar-free as much as possible and go with other sugar alternatives, I like to make jams for that reason, because those are sometimes harder to find in the store or more money. If you're harvesting broccoli and cauliflower and kohlrabi, I like to blanch those first and then freeze. Blanching is where you take the washed veggie, you put it in hot boiling water for like 30 seconds, and then you immediately submerge it in ice water in a different bowl. and then from there you can put it in your freezer. And by blanching it first, it helps stop the enzymes inside of the food. Basically, it helps it retain its color longer, its flavor and nutrition as it goes into the freezer. If you have cabbage, fermenting your cabbage into sauerkraut is so easy to do. I have a video about how to make sauerkraut. You need 1 head of cabbage, some salt, and a jar, and you can have sauerkraut in as little as 4 weeks. And it's gonna be way better tasting than anything you've ever had from the store. And then finally, as you're picking garlic scapes, I have preserved these by freezing them. I have pickled them, so in a similar way that you would make pickles, I use the scapes and did pickled scapes, and have also canned them, water bath canned them that way. You can dehydrate your garlic scapes and then grind them up into powder, and it has it's like a light garlic taste. Or you can fry them. So I've tried recipes where you bread the scapes and then fry them. Those are really good. I've wrapped bacon around the garlic scapes and cooked them on the grill. Those were also good. So there's lots of different ways that you can preserve your garlic scapes. And actually, my old boss, I used to work at a winery, a local winery, and my old boss, she recently reached out to me and told me about another way to preserve garlic scapes, which is to cut them up into small little chunks, and then you mix them in with melted butter. Once you have that mixture, you pour that into ice cube trays and freeze it, and then you have, whenever you need to cook something with like a garlicky flavor, you take that little ice cube that you've made of your butter and garlic scape, and then you throw that into your pan and cook in it, and then you have this nice garlic butter taste. So that's another easy way to preserve your garlic scapes. So much good information for the June garden. I mean, the garden season, we are in full swing of it right now. It is busy, there's a lot to do, there's a lot happening outside of the garden. But with the 5 P's of gardening, you can stay on top of things more easily. If you know what to do ahead of time, it helps you plan and be able to figure out what you need to do. You're not guessing, you're not looking things up on the fly. So I'm hopeful that today's video was helpful for you. If it was, please make sure to like the video and leave a comment below letting me know what was the most impactful part for you. So next up is the July home garden planning. Make sure to check that out and click the notifications bell so you know when that's posted. And check out the Great Lakes Veggie Gardener Guide, so you have all these tips and more for your 12-month home garden plan. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and talking about the home garden. I hope your gardens do wonderful. Let me know how they're doing in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next video. Do something you love today, friends. Talk to you next time. Bye.